Alright, so in section 2 we're going to be talking about reasoning and parallel lines. This goes back to what we were talking about in section 1. They really go hand in hand. So our first theorem is we're still working with our corresponding and alternate interior angles. So here we're working with corresponding angle converse. So if the corresponding angles are congruent, then the two lines cut by a transversal are parallel. So how is this different than what we did before? Well, last section we had to know the lines were parallel to know that the angles are congruent. In this section we're proving that the angles are congruent, or we're using reasoning to say yes, the angles are congruent, or no, the angles are not congruent. So what does this mean? It means that if angle 1 is congruent to angle 5, then line M is parallel to N, because that's a set of corresponding angles. Or maybe it's if I know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 6, then line M is parallel to N. Or, what's my next one? Angle 3. If angle 3 is congruent to angle, so here's 3, so corresponding would be 7, to angle 7, then M would be parallel to N. Or, if angle 4 is congruent to angle, so here's 4, corresponding would be 8, then M is parallel to N. So, basically if I have a pair of corresponding angles that are congruent, then my lines are parallel. Also, if I have a pair of corresponding angles that are not congruent, then that proves that my lines are not parallel. So, can we conclude that line M is parallel to line N and justify our reasoning? And so when I look at this, here's my transversal. 118 is on the same side as the transversal and in a corresponding position. So the answer is yes. We can conclude that so yes, M is parallel to N. My justification is because corresponding angles are congruent. And remember, that's a signal, or the symbol for congruency. But because both angles are 118, I can say that line M is parallel to line N. It's as simple as that, really. Alternate interior angle converse states that if my alternate interior angles are congruent, then the two lines cut by the transversal are parallel. So again, the difference from last section we knew the lines were parallel, therefore the angles were congruent. This time it's the reverse. If I know the angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So that means that if angle 3 is congruent, so here's angle 3, so its alternate interior is angle 6, is congruent to angle 6, then M is parallel to N. Or if angle 4 is congruent to, so 4 is with 5, angle 5, then line M is parallel to line N. So again, if I have a pair of alternate interior angles congruent, then the lines that they are between are parallel. So example 2, can we conclude that line M is parallel to line N? And we're going to justify our reasoning. So when I look, I have alternate interior angles because they're on opposite sides of the transversal and inside. But when I look at it, this one's 88 and this one's 87. So can we conclude that M is parallel to N? The answer is no. Justification is because alternate interior angles are not congruent. It's as simple as that. I justified my answer. Justify means basically giving a reason why you know they're not congruent or why you know they're not parallel. Alright, so example 3, what angles would have to be congruent so that we can prove M is parallel to N, and then we have justify. So basically, there's a lot of angles that we can use. So we can start with our corresponding. This is going to be our simple justification. Corresponding angles. And so our list for corresponding angles to prove that M is parallel to N. I'm going to just focus on the transversal Y and ignore transversal X for now. So that means angle 1, and so angle 1 corresponds with angle 5. So if angle 1 is congruent to angle 5, if angle 2 is congruent, so if I go to 2, 2 would be with 6. With angle 6, I could look at angle 3, and it would have to be congruent with angle 7. We can look at angle 4, and that one would have to be congruent with angle 8. So any of these 4 pairs of corresponding angles could prove that M is parallel to N, but since we have a second transversal in here, that means that there's another set. So I can do angle 9 would be congruent with angle 13. Those are corresponding angles. Angle 10 would be congruent to angle 14. 10 and 14. So then 11 with 15. Angle 11 congruent to angle 15. And angle 12 congruent with angle 16. Now, why are we needing to do this? Well, there's a homework problem or study plan problems where you're given an image like this and asked to decide based off of a list. And if you have a list of choices, you would look at them. Are they on the transversal cutting through the 2 lines? So notice we are working with M and N, and I went to the transversal. My transversal is Y, and then I pair up my angles. My other transversal is X, and I pair up my angles. Because this can get a little confusing on which side is which. Now we're going to go to our alternate interior angles. And when it comes to alternate interior angles, again, I'm going to go to Y. These are my, not 1 and 3. I went a little too far with that. 2, 4, 5, and 7 are my interior angles. So angle 2 would pair with angle 7, and angle 4 would pair with angle 5, and then coming down here, we're looking at 10, 12, 13, and 15. So angle 10 is alternate with angle 15. And angle 12 is alternate with angle 13. And so those are all the angle choices we would have to prove that the lines were parallel, and the justification would be the fact that these are all corresponding angles and these are all alternate interior angles. So here, yes, it's the same image, but now we're proving that X is parallel to Y, which means M and N become our transversals. So again, we've got corresponding angles and alternate interior angles. So if I focus on, and I'm going to ignore these over here for now. I probably wouldn't. You should just cover them. This is my best way of covering them. I'm going to erase that. you cover, don't scribble. So corresponding angles, if I start with angle 1 corresponds with angle 9. So angle 1 congruent to angle 9. Angle 2 is going to be congruent, angle 2 with angle 10. They are the corresponding angles. Angle 3 corresponds with angle 11, so congruent to angle 11. And angle 4 is congruent to angle 12, or would need to be congruent to angle 12. So that's for transversal M. I'm going to go ahead and do our alternate interior. So our alternate interiors changed to 3, 4, 9, and 10 for this one. So angle 3 is going to be congruent. Alternate interior would be with angle 10. Angle 4 is alternate interior with angle 9. So that's all for transversal M. Now I'm going to ignore M and look at transversal N. And so our corresponding angles there start with angle 5 being corresponding with angle 13. So angle 5 is angle 13. Angle 6 corresponds with angle 14. Oops, not just 4, 14. Angle 7 is congruent to angle 15. And we would need angle 8 congruent to angle 16. Any of these would prove that we have that X and Y are parallel lines. Alternate interior angles, so we're looking at 7, 8, 13, and 14 as our interior. So alternate would be 7 being congruent to angle 14 and angle 8 being congruent to angle 13. And so again, you'll have a list and you can just take that list and ask yourself, are they on the right transversals to prove that these lines are parallel? And then that's what you're doing. And that is it for section 2. Until next time.